Oh, let me try again. I don't know what I did now here. Yeah.
There's someone in the lobby.
We didn't add to this that they must introduce themselves in the chat. So maybe Michelle can just emphasize that. Yeah, I'm not opening the meeting to others yet until we finish sorting ourselves out.
Maybe if you stop sharing, Michelle, I don't know why. Dansile can't share.
I think because Michelle is still sharing.
Yeah,
Michelle, you need to stop sharing.
I've stopped sharing.
Okay, then let me try again. Now, if the colleagues from the other webinar can see me now in a different...
Okay,
there we go.
You just need to make it full screen.
Okay, can I move you guys away a little bit? Does it show?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if I can move them. Okay, I can move.
Right. Dansile, we also had a meeting yesterday where we discussed keeping our cameras on. So at the beginning, when Michelle was introducing us, we decided to have our cameras on and then only switch your camera off when someone else is presenting. And then at the end, during question time, we have it on as well, if that's okay.
All right. So can you see my slides moving?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, guys. There's where I have notes, but I see I can't see my notes now. So
you need to put it in presenter mode.
Which one is presenter
Print
mode?
them out.
Optimize option. No.
Have you got a second screen?
No.
Oh, it only works when you have a second screen.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I'll speak through without the notes. Just want to check because it's somewhere that it gets and then I can't move. Okay, there I can move. Okay, Shahida, I tried to remove a lot of text.
It looks lovely.
Sure I can hear all the audio on the live stream on YouTube.
Can you hear it?
Okay.
Dansile, you'll have about 7 minutes for your presentation. So I will need to stop you if it goes over that, unfortunately. Yeah.
No problem. I think I've timed myself and I am at 6 minutes.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
Okay, I'm going to start admitting people. Is that all right?
Before you do,
okay.
Does the presentation mode only work when you start projecting? When you start sharing? Because I can't do it while.
No, you should be able to see it. So yeah,
do you have
both screens on?
That's the advantage of reading mode. You can get your presentation into the reading view first and then share it. Otherwise, you have to share first and then go into projector mode.
Okay. I think I shared first and then went to presentation mode.
Okay.
Just see.
Okay.
And then in terms of keeping everybody on mute, Tabiso, Lindy, how do we manage that? Where are they?
Yeah, sorry, all the audio is being streamed to YouTube already. I'm trying to get Tabiso to stop. I don't know what's going on. We usually just, people, if they aren't muted, just mute them. If you mute all, you're going to mute the speaker as well. So I can check that if you want, but I'm going to be in the other side as well. So I can see if I can do both.
Yeah. So Michelle, I think as moderator, you're just going to have to call it out sometimes if you see somebody's yeah. Okay. All right, we've got 4 minutes to go. Are we done? Are we sorted?
Are you
Yes.
seeing the holding slide?
Yes, we are.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I think we are sorted.
Where am I? I will. I'm off camera.
Phumza, you're unmuted.
Okay, let me.
So exactly at 10, the chair can begin the proceedings.
Yeah.
Wouldn't use a tool. We wouldn't pick up a spanner if we had no reason to use. We've got to think of digital water in those ways of thinking. But of course, with digital water, our first leap is it's all about technology. It's not.
Martin, could I ask you to put your mic on mute? Thank you. Thanks very much. Morning, participants. Can I ask you please to make sure that your mic is on mute before we begin? So I'd like to welcome you to the CSIR webinar on the International Day for Biodiversity. This webinar is being hosted by the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Group in CSIR, with a guest speaker from one of our key partners, the South African National Biodiversity Institute. During the morning, we're going to be exploring biodiversity and its benefits, environmental degradation and restoration, floods and the role of nature, as well as ecological infrastructure and water security, among other subjects. My name is Dr. Michelle Audouin, and I'm a senior researcher at the CSIR, and I'll be moderating this webinar. My work is in the sphere of sustainable development and environmental management, and includes the facilitation of stakeholder engagement processes. I would like to introduce you to our panel members, but before I do that, please could I request that all participants on YouTube and MS Teams introduce themselves by putting their names and organizations or geographical area in the chat. So if you could take a moment to do that, we'd very much appreciate it. Thank you. Katleho, could I ask you please to mute? Thank you very much. Our panel members today are Dr. Sarah Davies. Sarah is a research group leader at the CSIR working on research and service provision in biodiversity and ecosystem services. We also have with us Dr. Phumza Ntshotsho, who is a senior researcher at the CSIR. She holds a PhD in restoration ecology and has over 2 decades of research experience in evidence-based ecological restoration practice and policy making. Dr. Ilse is an environmental scientist specializing in the fields of ecosystem services and understanding social ecological processes. We would also like to welcome our guest speaker, Cindi Mavimbela, who is a principal scientist on ecological infrastructure from the South African National Biodiversity Institute. Welcome, Dansile. We're going to begin the presentations with Sarah, who will be answering the question, why celebrate Biodiversity Day? Over to you, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm just sharing my screen. Please tell me if you can see my slides clearly.
We can see them, just onto presentation mode. Thank you.
Okay, is that projecting correctly?
Perfect.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle, and it's lovely to be here today. I'm going to start by going back to the first International Biodiversity Day. So on the 22nd of May, 1992, the Convention on Biological Diversity was adopted in Nairobi on our own continent. And this was followed by the first Earth Summit held in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And I'm actually old enough to remember a colleague at university who got to attend the Earth Summit in Brazil. So the Convention on Biological Diversity has had a very long life. It's still in play today. And it's given rise to a number of other conventions and agreements around environmental custodianship. So the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC, was adopted in 1992. The UN Convention on Combating Desertification was adopted in 1994. And 2 important protocols, the Cartagena Protocol governing biotechnology and biosafety, and the Nagoya Protocol, which talks about how access and benefit sharing of biodiversity should be done with communities and local populations. So the goal of the first Earth Summit was to create a global plan for addressing environmental and development issues. Countries that are concerned about ecosystem and human futures have since then got together to set goals for protection and wise use of natural resources. And from this has arisen the Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that today, the Paris Agreement on mitigating and adapting to climate change, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which is the most recent one, which was adopted just a couple of years ago. So the context for all of this and the importance for biodiversity is that humans have gone from being just one of millions of species on our planet to being a single species that is using 32%, this is estimated, of the Earth's resources just for itself as one species. And this comes from a fascinating book chapter by Yadvinder Mali, and I would really recommend that you read his fascinating analysis of how the energy on the planet is being is being adopted and used by humans. So what is biodiversity and why should we be concerned about it? So biodiversity is the sum of all life on Earth. That's the definition. It sustains human lives and livelihoods and the services which we rely on. So our air, clean water, and fertile soil that we use to produce food, all are all bound up with biodiversity and a product of biodiversity. So Africa has a number of hotspots which are very high in diversity. These include genetic variation among groups of organisms, a diversity of species that coexist together, and also diversity of ecosystems, which make a very rich continent that we live on. So conserving biodiversity means looking after all these different levels of biodiversity in our world. South Africa is recognized as one of the Earth's 17 megadiverse nations and is home to 3 of the world's biodiversity hotspots. I'm not sure if other countries have as many hotspots as we have. I haven't actually read up on that, but it would be interesting to know. So we have along our eastern seaboard, the Maputaland, Ponderland, Albany hotspot, which is really the coastal forests along our east coast and the mosaic of grasslands and forests, which is quite unique. Then we have the Cape Floristic region in the southwest, which has an incredible number of species, 7,000 or 8,000 plant species alone, and is one of the richest hotspots in the entire world. And then we have the succulent Karoo on our west coast and western hinterland, which accommodates the dwarf shrublands and succulents that we know in the Karoo and the drier regions of our continent. Could you please mute your microphone? Somebody is unmuted. Thank you. So what do biodiversity scientists do? As biodiversity scientists and researchers, we work on how to make development more sustainable and how to ensure that the Earth's resources continue to provide benefits in the long-term future. This means that we need to protect ecosystems that are important for South Africa's environment, economy, and society. And to give you an example of why ecosystems are important, in South Africa, most of our water supply comes from mountain areas that store, purify, and release water in a way that humans can easily utilize. If these natural systems aren't functioning well or are invaded by alien trees or eroded or overgrazed, then our cities, towns, and farms experience water shortages, and they may also experience droughts and floods as a result. Our settlements will then receive poor quality water from the mountain catchments, and that water will be expensive to clean so that it's fit for human use. Also, the oceans and coasts will not receive the water flow that they need to sustain fish populations and maintain beaches, estuaries, and river mouths. At the CSIR, we're developing systems and tools to protect ecosystems and support decision makers. For example, governments, industries, businesses, and municipalities. So that's just to give you a little thumbnail of what we are doing. And I'm now going to hand over to the other panelists who will talk about some of the specialist areas that they are working in. Thank you. Over to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I think some very, very interesting statistics there. South Africa is one of the Earth's 17 megadiverse nations and home to 3 of the world's biodiversity hotspots. I think that is a treasure that we have, and we need to protect our ecosystems. Next is Dr. Phumza Ntshotsho. Welcome, Phumza.
Thank you, Michelle. Let me project my presentation. Share. Am I sharing?
Yes, you are sharing.
Okay.
It's not yet on presentation mode.
Can you see it now?
Welcome to part.
It is.
Thank you very much.
Can you see it?
It is. We've seen the notes as well as the presentation.
It's on presentation mode on my side.
Perhaps go to view. Go to view and reader mode
Stop
in
sharing.
PowerPoint.
And apologies for this. Reader mode, share. Can you see it now?
It's still on to notes.
Can you project from your side, Michelle, because I've got it on the folder.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just ask Dansile if she will present next, and that can just give Phumza some time. So I'd just like to ask Dansile Cindi Mavimbela from the South African National Biodiversity Institute. She is going to be giving us a presentation on SANBI's initiatives in ecological infrastructure. Over to you, Dansile.
Thank you, Michelle. Just to add on the introduction, SANBI is an entity of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, just to share that with colleagues. And we also play a critical role on policy advice for the department and the sector. Can you see my screen, Michelle?
Yes, it looks good.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, colleagues, for inviting me to be part of the celebration of the International Day for Biological Diversity. And I like the theme, harmony with nature and sustainable development. It's amazing. And I'm really excited to be here. I will not do justice to the presentation as I've been asked. I will touch on some of the initiatives that I am directly linked with within my division, Biodiversity Information and Policy Advice in SANBI. And if colleagues want to find out more about other initiatives that we are busy with at SANBI or are in the pipeline, please feel free to share an email with me. I'll have my email address at the end of this. So what is ecological infrastructure? We have a definition at SANBI which speaks to naturally functioning ecosystems. And then one person can say, what is ecosystems? You know, I think the first speaker did mention what is ecosystems. And I just want to remind everyone that when we're talking ecosystems, we're talking about those areas that when you're talking national functioning, those areas that are really needing to work together as naturally as they are meant to be. And those are the plants, the animals, and other organizations. And then they form this bubble of life. And then we're saying, including both non-living and living organisms when we're talking ecosystems. And what do these ecosystems do? They deliver valuable services to people. It's free services. You can take ecological infrastructure as a public good. You know, we've got a lot of ecological infrastructure in our country. We've got a potential to support development. We can unlock economic potential for our ecological infrastructure, because it is an infrastructure that comes free of charge, you know, and we like to see it as something that really needs to be protected, something that needs to be taken care of and nurtured for the future to be able to use it. So we're talking about our healthy mountain catchments, our rivers, our wetlands, coastal dunes, and other corridors of natural habitat. So what are these initiatives that I've been asked to speak about? I will touch on about 7 of our initiatives. So we had a project called Ecological Infrastructure for Water Security project. We currently have a living catchments program. We've got biodiversity stewardship. We've got biodiversity economy projects, and working on the development of a thriving people and nature project. We also have ecosystem-based adaptation projects, which are the Global Climate Fund project that are in the pipelines. We also have the program on invasive species and also capacity strengthening for management of biological invasions. So I'm also going to touch on the approach that we use around influencing policy. As I said, I'm from policy advice, policy information and biodiversity information and policy advice. And also we like to look at things as a way of understanding the risk, the dependencies and opportunities that come with working in that approach, and how do we apply this work. It's a lot of co-calls that come with it, co-development, partnerships, collaboration, and making sure that we learn together as we do this work. We learn as we do it. So the first initiative being, the first project being the Ecological Infrastructure for Water Security, which was a 7-year multi-stakeholder project. It was aimed at unlocking development for finance to secure ecological infrastructure for water security in 2 critical catchments. So this project was funded through the Global Environmental Facility, GEF, and implemented by the Development Bank of Southern Africa, DBSA, in partnership with our mother department, Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment, and then executed by SANBI. And it was demonstrated in Bergen-Brede catchment in the Western Cape and the Greater Umgeni catchment and in KZN. So what were we aiming to do was really around demonstrating how, when you invest in ecological infrastructure, you can contribute to water security. And what are we saying? We are advocating to say ecological infrastructure is a way to support built infrastructure for. So when you look at that picture there, you can see that when we've got our strategic water source areas being secured, we've got healthy ecosystems. Then when we come back to the built infrastructure where we've got our dams, our water treatments, all this works so much together to complement and help each other to function in such a way that there's no degradation that happens in the future. So also want to create an enabling environment to make sure that we support policy. We look at financing mechanisms, and also we looked at natural capital accounts at the same time. And then sharing the knowledge that is generated through the project to mobilize further action. So we have learned a lot of lessons from this, and most of the projects that are coming after EI for water security are really based on the lessons that have been learned, such as the Living Catchments program. It was a project for the past 5 years and started being a program last year in October when the DSTI, Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, funded SANBI to evolve from being a project to being a living catchments program. That's also one of the programs that are really a demonstration of sustainability. It's a 3-year program that will happen in different districts and municipalities, being the districts in the Eastern Cape, Alfred Nzo District Municipality, in Mpumalanga, Ehlanzeni District Municipality, as well as in Limpopo, Vembe District Municipality. And all these district municipalities, they are associated within some of the strategic water source areas, such as the Eastern Cape, Drakensberg, and other Southern Drakensberg thingy. So what are we saying in the program? We're saying we want to continue supporting partnership for learning across landscapes in the district. We also want to be integrating in the indigenous knowledge system into both land and water management practices. What are we doing that? We're making sure that we want to support national biodiversity objectives as well as global objectives and agreements that we have as a country. We also want to develop new skills, generate new knowledge, and contribute towards the social and economic development. What are we saying about the degraded ecosystem? We also want to make sure that we support in initiatives that are working towards restoration of degraded land, as well as to ensure that we really look after the ecological integrity and connectivity in the different landscapes. We have a very simple theory of change. We're looking at the three activities: the convening, the supporting, and the implementation of intervention. We know that if we do that, we will create knowledge that strengthens collaboration, resilience, and adaptation to climate change across these landscapes, as well as making sure that we achieve biodiversity regeneration at the end of the day. Then we also looking at how do we align this work with international global standards of restoration. We are working on, we do engage with stakeholders. We draw on so many types of knowledges. We talked about the indigenous knowledge system integration. Also look at, we seek to make sure that we have the highest level of recovery where degradation has happened, and also make sure that there are gains that we really have value, especially when we're looking at how do we upscale this kind of work that we are doing. And all of this is adapted from the Society of Ecological Restoration, SANBI principles. And then we've got the other projects, biodiversity stewardship projects, and one of them being the biodiversity economy project. It is piloted in the Greater Kruger in Limpopo, in Isimalanga, so in KZN, as well as in the Eastern Cape in the Amatole district. So this is just the areas where we have the other initiatives. We also have the one in the pipeline where we're still developing a proposal for the project called Thriving People and Nature. And we're looking at the 5 areas being Mapubungwe in Makulela in Limpopo. We've got Kruger to Lipalale also in Limpopo. We also has the Northern Cape, the 2 areas in the Northern Cape, and also just between Northern Cape and the Free State, the Orange Cone to Namakwa areas. So these are some of the projects that we are still working on, including the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund proposals that are under development. We've got 8 of those in the pipeline, and we've got the scaling up ecosystems-based approaches to managing climate intensified disaster risk in vulnerable regions in South Africa. That is ECO-DRR. That one is at the more advanced stages than the other 2, that IBA Farm as well as IBA Water projects. So these are the projects that will be executed or will be implemented by SANBI in partnership with other partners, as we usually work with government partners, the municipality, non-government partners in the different landscape when we do our project. Even when we're still doing the proposal, we do engage very meaningful, as well as engaging explicitly with our partners as we work. We don't just pilot ourselves through, but we really work into co-creation of this work. So what are we concentrating on? We're looking at how can we rehabilitate landscapes and natural resource management enhancement. We want to be building capacity of institutions at catchment and municipal level. We also, the main focus, looking at how do we mainstream ecological infrastructure into planning processes. We're talking strategic water source areas, we're talking the municipalities, we're talking citizen science work, and also contributing to the development and implementation of catchment management strategies. We pride ourselves in how much we work into the youth capacity development. We've got a couple of enviro champs, eco champs, nature champs, young professionals and students that have been part and parcel of our initiatives throughout the landscape, throughout the country, and at catchment level, at municipal level, nationally, and in all the different levels of education. We work with the youth very closely in our programs. And then we have the invasive species program, which is also funded through the department, and they do a lot of risk analysis. Currently, we have more than 140 taxa that are not are being done at the risk analysis, and we also have the 17 that are also going to be listed in our NEMBA, National Environment and Management Biodiversity Act. And then we also have the work that we're doing on research. We've got more than 300 papers in peer-reviewed journals, and we've done 3 reports to date on a national status report of invasion in South Africa. Yet again, there's that capacity development element where we've got about 22 honor students, 29 master's students, 8 PhD, and those are mostly the youth. And that is the one area of work where I am very closely involved, and I am very proud of sharing to people. And I can't like end the sentence without saying our youth, our youth. And then what lessons I want to share with you guys? I want to share with you guys to say, really what we've seen in the past couple of years, past 7 years, if not 10 years, the value of social learning, you know, and also making sure that you engage and work with stakeholders from the beginning. You look at how do you address barriers, and also the issue of aligning future investment. You know, you look at what are my priorities, what are your priorities, how do we align this work, how do we bring in the participatory processes, the quieter voices being listened to, feeling like they are being heard, meaningful partnership, coordination, collaboration across sectors, you know, parallel, vertical, and all of that, and making sure that we all learn as we are doing these things and as we are doing this work. I can't say much about the youth. They bring new insights. They bring the energy. They make you feel like you're also youth, and they're also multipliers, if we can talk about that. We've also realized that in our work, we've been neglecting some of the things around gender mainstreaming. So that is one of the areas that we've learned lessons to say gender mainstreaming is as important in other elements of any project, you know, especially when we look at women as the primary givers or caregivers of children. And there's a lot of similarities between women and water, apparently, but that's a story for another day. So look at how women are and how water is, and then you realize the similarities I'm talking about. And then there also the other lessons around resource mobilization. How do we resource together? How do we mobilize together? How do we co-resource? And what does that even look like? It's not always about financial gains, but it comes in different forms. And one needs to realize that my contribution can be as effective as the contribution that is brought in monetary value, even if mine is not in financial values. I want to say thank you to everyone. I've just put about a number of South African languages. Ngiyabonga is Zulu, Ndilivua is Venda, thank you, English, thank you, Afrikaans, Kialeboga in Sesotho. I am Mosotho by birth, but I am married to the Swatis, Mavimbelas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dansile. So Dansile, that was an excellent presentation of SANBI's initiatives, their extensive work around the country with multiple stakeholders at multiple scales. So thank you very much for that. Phumza will now present her talk, which is entitled Restoring Planet Earth Because There Is No Planet B. Over to you, Phumza.
Thank you, Michelle, and apologies to everyone for the glitch I experienced when I was going to present previously. Sarah has kindly offered to project my presentation. It is visible to me, and I am hoping that it is visible to everyone else.
Yes, it is. It looks good.
Thank you. Colleagues, we have one planet, and it is called planet Earth. It's the only planet that's able to sustain human life. There's no planet B that we can take a chartered flight to when this planet is totally uninhabitable. So today I am going to talk about the problems that we are facing as planet Earth. Next slide, please, Sarah. We are living on borrowed time, literally. There's a concept known as Earth Overshoot Day. This is a day that signifies when humanity's demand for natural resources exceeds what Earth can replenish in that year. So basically, we are living in overdraft once we have hit the Earth Overshoot Day. Earth Overshoot Day has been coming sooner and sooner every year. Is someone not muted?
Could I just ask everyone to mute?
Thank you. Planet Overshoot Day has been coming sooner every year. In fact, in 2024, it was in August. So on the 1st of August. So from the 2nd of August, we're actually living in overdraft. This is not sustainable because the Earth is simply not able to sustain life. Next slide, please, Sarah. No, not which slide? No, the previous slide, Sarah. The one on, I don't know what happened, but there was another concept I wanted to talk about, and that is the concept of planetary boundaries. Planetary boundaries speak to the capacity of planet Earth to sustain life. There are 9 measures that have been established, and biological integrity is one of those measures. We have exceeded 6 of the planetary boundaries, meaning that we are critically endangering planet Earth's ability to support life on Earth. So we're not just a planet in distress, but we're also a country in distress. Next slide, please, Sarah. According to the National Biodiversity Assessment conducted by the South African National Biodiversity Institute, South African ecosystems, about 50% of South African ecosystems are categorized as threatened. This biodiversity loss, which is exacerbated by land degradation, is a significant issue, and it impacts natural ecosystems and our own well-being. So this phenomenon of degraded ecosystems is not just a global phenomenon, but it's quite relevant at the local scale. It affects us personally. Next slide, please. Fortunately, not all is lost. There is hope. South Africa is signatory to several international agreements, and Sarah has touched on quite a few of these. As far back as 2000, we signed up for the Millennium Development Goals, which were 8 goals. Goal number 7 specifically related to natural ecosystems and developing sustainably without adversely affecting natural ecosystems. And these Millennium Development Goals expired in 2015, and they were succeeded by the Sustainable Development Goals, which we need to achieve by 2030. There are several goals under the SDGs that speak to the natural environment. We're also signatory to the United Nations Convention to Combat Climate Change. This one has been quite topical because every person is aware or is talking about the negative impacts of climate change. We see the weather patterns changing. We see extreme climate events happening more frequently. And I consider degradation and climate change as evil twins because climate change actually exacerbates degradation, and degradation contributes to climate change and the negative impacts thereof. The other conventions as well that we are signatory to, like the Convention to Combat Desertification, specifically related to biodiversity and ecosystems. Sarah did mention the Convention on Biological Diversity. Apologies for the typo there. It should be CBD, the first one. And then more recently, the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, IPBES. With regards to IPBES, there was an assessment released in 2018, published in 2018, on land degradation and restoration. That assessment highlighted that land degradation is a global phenomenon. It is widespread, it is a systematic problem, and it is largely driven by human activities. We need urgent action to avoid, reduce, and reverse land degradation. And the window of opportunity, the window to act, is fast closing. If planet Earth tips over the edge, we may see ourselves living in an inhabitable planet or facing difficulties in terms of reversing the tide. Next slide, please, Sarah. At the core of the response options that are available to reverse the tide in biodiversity loss and ecosystem degradation is the option of ecological restoration. And Dee, who spoke before me, referred to several examples that have been implemented locally, initiatives that are targeted at reversing the tide. And she did speak on the role of ecological restoration and the initiatives that are being implemented. Ecological restoration is defined as the process of assisting the recovery of an ecosystem that has been degraded, damaged, or destroyed. It happens along a continuum, starting from just reducing societal impacts. And this is where an individual can play a role, such as being aware and conscious of one's consumption patterns, where one's food comes from, how it is grown, and what the impacts of the food value chain are on natural ecosystems. And then it goes all the way to fully recovering native ecosystems, which in my opinion, I feel is a stretched goal, especially considering just how widespread and how far gone degradation is globally and locally, in fact. Next slide, please, Sarah. Considering the interlinked nature of degradation and climate change, one of the drives and one of the discourses that has been gaining popularity in recent times is the notion of ecosystem-based adaptation. This is known as a strategy that uses biodiversity and ecosystem services to help communities adapt to the impacts of climate change. It involves managing, conserving, and restoring ecosystems to ensure they continue providing the services that we so highly depend on for well-being. Such ecosystem services, or the benefits that we obtain from nature, include flood protection, water quality, food security. So essentially, ecosystem-based adaptation has three components. It helps people adapt to the negative impacts of climate change. It makes use of biodiversity, and it should be part of an overall adaptation strategy. And we're in a fortunate position in South Africa because we are quite advanced in terms of policies and legislation that speak to the climate change response effort, and specifically climate change adaptation. Next slide, please. That is just it's really a high-level view of where things are at in terms of degradation or the state of biodiversity and ecosystems, both globally and locally. The initiatives that or the options for responding to the threat that biodiversity loss and ecosystem service loss poses to human well-being. Especially these efforts have been largely driven by government, but the message I want to leave you with is that it is not only the responsibility of government to help stem the tide. We are all dependent on planet Earth. We do not have another option. Everyone, and I mean absolutely everyone, can play a role in conserving, protecting, and restoring degraded ecosystems. We can all turn the tide, and I want to invite you to continue. I believe in the concept of each one, teach one. I think that us as the people in attendance here, we have some awareness of the problems that we face, the problems that the natural environment faces, and it is up to us to educate others and just increase awareness. And with improved awareness, I believe there will be action and we can turn the tide, make sure, or rather improve the chances of developing sustainably so that there is a habitable planet, not just for the current generations, but for the future generations as well. Thank you. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Phumza. It's really interesting to hear of the global agreements that South Africa is part of, to see that list of global agreements, and also to learn a bit more about ecological restoration and ecosystem-based adaptation, and ultimately a message of hope. So thank you very much for that, Phumza. Last and definitely not least, we're going to have Ilse, who will now be presenting to us on flood hazard modeling and the role of nature.
Okay, I haven't put myself off mute. Thank you, Michelle. So I'll be talking a bit about flood hazard modeling and the work that we do in the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Group. So flood hazard modeling uses hydrological and hydraulic models to simulate flood events. And we do this to assess risks and to guide planning and response. So the key components of flood hazard modeling is looking at rainfall runoff relationships. So looking at when a rainfall event actually leads to runoff in a landscape. Also looking at river and surface flow dynamics, how those interact with each other, as well as topography and land use. And why is it so important for us to model flood hazards? It helps us to predict flood-prone areas. It informs infrastructure development and land use planning, and it also supports early warning systems and disaster preparedness. Ecological infrastructure and flood regulation I'd like to talk about next. So flood regulation is an ecosystem service, and an ecosystem service is all the benefits that humans derive from nature. But flood regulation in particular describes an ecosystem's capacity to reduce the impacts of floods, such as a decreased flood frequency and severity, reduced flood peaks, and inundation areas. So these are our fighters in the against floods, and they are wetlands, and they act like sponges, absorbing and slowing floodwaters. Then we also have riparian buffers. So that's like the strip of vegetation you usually see along a river course. And these stabilize riverbanks, and they also reduce erosion. And then you have your natural vegetation, such as fynbos and grasslands, which enhances your infiltration capacity, and it also reduces surface runoff. So these it actually provides us with those ecosystem services of water regulation and purification, also soil retention and erosion control, as well as climate moderation. So the picture on the right, that's the silver mine wetland in Cape Town. And the silver mine wetland serves as a model for urban waterways, establishing a cooperative relationship between the environment, people, and their well-being. So as you can see, this wetland actually runs through an urban area. And the floodplain was initially planned to be canalized due to flooding of nearby houses during the winter season. And canalization is an approach where you put cement, and then this is a way to reduce flooding. But a group of nature conservationists managed to ensure that it was rehabilitated instead. And this was a crucial initiative to preserve the ecosystem's balance, to reduce flood hazards, and to create a safe breeding environment for threatened species as well. So it actually serves as a prototype for other city waterways, highlighting the significance of adequate wetland maintenance. So this wetland is fully functional. It provides ecosystem services of flood regulation, also recreation, so people can come and enjoy nature. They can use it for walks, and nature is also thriving. So all the plant species and animal species are also able to live there. So it's really a good example of living in harmony with nature. Then I wanted to talk about strategic water source areas. So these are areas of land that either supply a disproportionate quantity of mean annual surface water runoff in relation to their size, and they are considered nationally important, or it's areas that have very high groundwater recharge and where groundwater forms a naturally important resource, or it can also be areas where both occurs. So in South Africa, 10% of our land area provides 50% of surface water. So they are super important. They are vital ecological infrastructure for water supply and also for flood regulation. But these areas are often under pressure from development, from mining, as well as agriculture. And so I just wanted to talk about a little bit about what our group, the Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services Group, has contributed towards protecting and rehabilitating strategic water source areas. So we've been involved in mapping and prioritizing protection and the restoration of strategic water source areas, also advocating for the integration of strategic water source areas into municipal planning tools, such as the spatial development frameworks and the integrated development plans, and also just supporting municipalities to recognize and manage these areas as green infrastructure. So on the right, you can see a map of the 22 strategic water source areas for surface water, and there's 37 strategic water source areas for groundwater. And our group was instrumental in mapping and identifying these areas for strategic water source areas. And then I also wanted to touch on another project. This is the CSIR Green Book. This was an interdisciplinary project, involved lots of different researchers in the CSIR, and it was developed to support municipal planning under climate change. And so it has a lot of different features it looks at, but one of the things that I worked on was the National Flood Hazard Mapping, looking at it under present and future climate scenarios. And what it identifies areas of risk of increased flood hazard due to climate and land use change. So on the right is a map showing the flood hazard index for South Africa. It defines areas that are susceptible to flooding, and this map can be used for land use planning, emergency preparedness, and reducing flood risk through various mitigation measures. And so it can really be used, and it is being used by planners and decision makers, and to help them with identifying those spatial risk areas. And I've included the link there, www.greenbook.co.za. It's really a very easy to understand, interactive platform, and I encourage you to go there and just have a look and see all of the different tools that you can use to support municipal planning under climate change. Thank you so much. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks very much, Ilse. Very interesting to hear about strategic water source areas. 10% of the land area provides 50% of the surface water. So these are obviously areas that are absolutely critical and need to be conserved, maintained, and enhanced. So thank you very much, Ilse. We're now going to move on to questions for the panel. We will be ending at 11, so we have just a little time for some questions. In the meantime, please could those watching on YouTube or MS Teams write any questions that they may have in the panel, for our panel in the chat. I'm going to start with a question to Sarah. Sarah, we often hear the term nature positive being used in relation to biodiversity. What is the difference between nature and biodiversity?
Thanks, Michelle. The difference between nature and biodiversity is that nature refers to everything that is natural on our planet, which I guess is really everything that exists on our planet. So it can include both the living and the non-living environment. So nature includes inanimate things and earth processes, landforms, landscapes, rocks, water, and air, where those are not necessarily a living component, whereas biodiversity is specifically about living things. So it wouldn't include rocks or oxygen molecules in the air or water itself, unless that water contains life. So I think that's the difference. Essentially, we can use them interchangeably in some contexts, but the definition of nature would be that it includes everything, whereas biodiversity specifically includes living organisms.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to ask Phumza. Phumza, what are the Sustainable Development Goals and why do we need to know about and support them?
Thank you, Michelle. The Sustainable Development Goals are a global effort by nations affiliated to the United Nations. They were adopted in 2015 and they aim to address global challenges and achieve a sustainable future by 2030. It's 17 interconnected goals that speak to different aspects of human life, the environment, social systems, economic systems, security, but they are all about ensuring sustainable life on Earth and prosperous nations while protecting the Earth and not developing at a rate or in a manner that jeopardizes the natural environment. We should care about sustainable development goals because if societies develop unsustainably, we will be damaging the very natural systems that we depend on for everything. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Phumza. I see that there is a hand up. I don't see the name. It says Kotzee, Food, Energy, Water, South Africa. Would you like to ask your question?
Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity. We coming from the Food, Energy, Water South Africa Tertiary Cooperative. We are the only tertiary cooperative in the food, water, energy mixers. We are working with under the Department of Forest, Fisheries and Environment as they are leading the water infrastructure of the country on the biodiversity, that is your fish and other aquatic plants as well. across the country. We have been working, the department found, because the department was only found now recently in 2018 or 2019. Before then it was within agriculture. We have solutions. We are talking greening of the Kalahari as a tertiary cooperative. We are speaking to energy to be generated from our water catchments, from our rivers, from our canals, and as we're saving that precious resource. But what we don't see SANBI talking to us. They're only talking to DFFE. They're not talking to the people on the ground, the people that are harvesting invasive species, the people that are making it a point that our waters are clean by cleaning such systems. We have been trying to get a conversation with SANBI, but to no avail. We would like to know as to how can we, as cooperatives, as the people who are owning the land, how can we be part and parcel of the whole value chain? We hear you speaking Namakwa land.
Okay. Thank you.
Kimberley. All right, let me hang on.
So my apologies to interrupt. I just want to make sure that Dansile gets an opportunity to respond. Dansile?
Thanks for that. I just didn't get your name because your connection is not so good. And I'd like to apologize if the feeling is that SANBI isn't reaching out to the local communities out there. It is really one of our key activities where we're really working very closely with local communities, cooperatives in different areas. And I would like for you to reach out, as I will share my email address in the chat, because we really hold the issue of integrating indigenous knowledge system in making sure that people come together and talk to one another, and local people are one of the key stakeholders that we really reach out to. And I would like to apologize if that is not felt by your community, and we will try and rectify that as we engage further outside this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dansile.
We are national. We are in each and every province across South Africa. So it's communities, it's not community.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And please do reach out to Dansile. I'm going to ask Ilse a question. Ilse, what are the risks of continuing with business as usual flood mitigation approaches that ignore nature-based solutions? We just have a minute, Ilse.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Thanks, Michelle. So one of the biggest risks of actually sticking with just traditional grey-only flood mitigation approaches is that we're actually creating a false sense of security for ourselves. So infrastructure like levees or concrete channels that I mentioned earlier, they might work for a short while, but they're very rigid, they're expensive to maintain, and they can fail under extreme events, especially like with climate change, intensifying flood risk like we saw in the Durban floods not too long ago. So by ignoring your nature-based options like wetlands and floodplains or riparian buffers, we're not just missing a key piece of that resilience puzzle, but we're also missing out on the co-benefits that these systems can offer, like water purification and carbon storage and biodiversity support. So ultimately, the business as usual path puts us at a long-term risk. So financially, socially, and ecologically. So we really need to shift to more hybrid approaches that recognizes ecosystems as active infrastructure while also still incorporating your grey infrastructure. So thanks. I hope that
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Right, spot on 11 o'clock. I see that there are still more hands, but what I would like to do is to encourage you to reach out to the speakers. Can I ask the speakers please to put their email addresses in the chat, if possible? And then if you could reach out to them with your questions, that would be great. So I would like to thank you all for your participation in this webinar. There has been very interesting discussion, and we hope that it leads to and inspires you to contribute to the protection and sustainable use of biodiversity in your area going forward. Thank you everyone for your participation, and I would now like to close this webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.